Вы идете?
Да, конечно. We continue our work. We will be speaking about the monitoring of visa practicing for Schengen area and for Crimean people. Good morning, everybody. The public organization Europe Without Barriers, as you probably know, systematically studies the issues of visa practice, European Union, Schengen countries, and this year, this is first piece of news for you, we recover the systematic monitoring of the visa practical steps of the countries of European Union towards Ukrainian citizens, in particular because of introduction of biometric identificator in consulate departments. You know that now everybody who would like to get visa must visit the consular department to be measured biometrically and then waiting for visa. Secondly, in spite of visa dialogue that is running today between Ukraine and European Union, we expect next year the visa-free entry will be introduced between Ukraine and EU, but in the area of Schengen visa issuance, unfortunately, we see the complications at the level of the list of necessary documents in sense of the number of refusals. And it is interesting to look over the consular actions in sense of simplification of visa. How do they react for modern immigration challenges related to the increase of people seeking asylum from Ukraine? The number has increased, but once again I would like to say that the understanding of that in EU member states is more than the estimates are improper. So you know that the biometric procedure or biometric data taken in Ukraine has already been supported by certain regulations, and since next year we expect to have one more identification document, so-called ID card, that will in fact replace the domestic Ukrainian passports. That's why we would like to prepare all the recommendations to avoid all the problems that emerged in January this year when we started to get our biometric passports. Hence, today the supervisory mission of European Union is staying in Ukraine, that is trying to understand what have already been done by Ukrainian parliament, Ukrainian government in order to liberalize the visa regime. Today we may speak of the problems existing now, what are the trends today in the area of visa issuance. First of all, we put our focus on the citizens of Ukraine, first of all, that today in principle have certain limits in sense of mobility and freedom of movement as inside Ukraine and outside of Ukraine as well. So we put our accent to Crimean people. They are still citizens of Ukraine. And what conditions have been put for them to obtain European visa, and how the consular departments inform them on the grounds for visas for them, because we are convinced that if the consular departments has all the necessary, did all the necessary steps to open this information at all the communication channels in proper language, then it is much easier for any claimant to obtain visa. I give floor to my colleague, who will inform you on what intermediary conclusions we've been made studying this type of monitoring in visa issuance problems for Crimean citizens. Kateryna, the floor is yours. Thank you. First of all, I would like to report on the results of the website monitoring informing Crimean people in sense of Schengen-related, Schengen visa-related issues. Only 5 countries in Schengen area, they have in their website certain announcements for Crimean people. Specifically, it's Germany, Greece, Estonia, France, and Poland. Once again, I would like to say that we as well monitored information stands in consular departments, in embassies, and we discovered that nothing like a special information for Crimean citizens or citizens of Crimean Peninsula. They do not have proper access to free information. In the framework of our monitoring, we understand that internet page, web page, is the most important source of information for Crimean people, because internet is most, say, comfortable for them to get to that information. Unfortunately, only 5 countries mentioned they provide this information. As well, we have 2 ways that are used in Russian territory to stop citizens of Ukraine living in Crimea to get visas. It was 2006 when Russian authorities banned to issue visas for people living in Crimea and having Ukrainian citizenship. First of all, people from Crimea are deprived of getting passports in Crimea, so the passports that are issued in Rostov or other cities in the mainland of Russia, it will enable them easier to get visas, and the visa will cost them something like 14,000 hryvnia. We have some intermediaries, some agents that could assist them to get visas even for Russian passports issued in Crimea. We know about the shadow service market, and the cost, the price of those services is rather high, sometimes over 500 euro. Again, studying the information on the websites, we know that Crimean people could only get visas for Greece and Poland in consular departments in Odessa. In Germany, for Germany visa, they must approach Kiev embassy, Kiev office of German embassy. So this is all of the existing information. Thank you. I only would like to add that this problem is important, And why it is important? First of all, because the existence of this shadow market, service market, is an evidence of the fact that not all the consular department of European Union, specifically those situated in Russia, get along with the rules that's stipulated by European Union themselves, and unfortunately they have double standards. The standards existed before and they are existing now. And the second thesis, why it is important to understand those problems, why it is important to solve them, because in fact the visa agents, so to say, they have already been established according to the visa code of European Union. They are legal and most of them are concentrated in Kiev. At the same time, some people in other cities, they in fact should travel long distances in order to get visa, to submit their documents. And since there are a lot of visa centers acting as intermediaries, it is probably a necessity to increase their number to deal with all the citizens that cover this distance to submit their documents. And third thesis, just issuance of Schengen visa for Ukrainian citizens living with Russian passports and support them. That could be a challenge for our own security, because in fact, for instance, those people getting Schengen visa cross-border, and if they stay there, if they stay abroad, then the question, who are those people? Are they citizens of Ukraine or citizens of Russia? And would it probably be a criticism of Ukraine as a state that the migration risks related to Ukrainian people constitute a certain challenge for European Union? That's why we have a recommendation for the consular departments of European embassies and for European Commission that the proper informing of citizens in their opportunity to get Schengen visa for those to be improved. On the other hand, there's a recommendation for Ukrainian government to arrange for another type of dialogue with all the stakeholders, with the European Union, to regulate this issue. First, we are speaking about the visa agents, and secondly, visa centers, and secondly, the Schengen visa to be obtained by Crimean citizens. Dear colleagues, now the time for questions. Radio Freedom, Bogdana Kostyuk. Taking into account migration risks, we have a risk that Schengen zone will suspend its existence. Austrian and Polish authorities, they discussed this. Second question, what is the influence of that over Ukraine? Secondly, if the situation when Crimean citizen crossed border with Russian passport and having Ukrainian passport for international traveling, he probably coming back through Moscow and he shown Russian passport, for instance. What to do with them? I will try to answer your first question. Yes, in the time when we run reforms in very important issues like anti-corruptive actions, changes of visa arrangements, etc., the Schengen zone is being modified, and of course it's understandable why Schengen reacts this way to immigration risks, because the policy of taking refugees should be changed for a long time ago. It should have been changed when we understand what is the end point of migrants. We understand that this is Germany, Sweden, the countries where the asylum policy is aimed at maximum protection of any refugee and enabled for him to stay for a long time in EU territory and even have certain assistance there, including monetary assistance. Those conditions, those regulations, in many cases motivate migrants to end up in those countries. So the closure of Schengen, of course, if it happens, would be temporary, because for EU citizens, the travels between Schengen countries and freedom of that movement is very important in the sense of costs involved, in sense of economics involved. Of course, this reaction will be temporary one. Secondly, for us to understand, visa-free regime, as we understand this process from inside, this is the nearest perspective for Ukraine, but we must understand, we must evaluate not the fact for visa-free regime, because we're speaking about the short-term visa, but we must understand that in order to establish this visa-free regime, we have a lot of reforms, and this demand in society for visa-free regime, this is a very powerful instrument, a powerful tool for our government to finally do all the necessary reforms. That's why Schengen zone will remain in the same format. At the same time, we must care for the changes that are going on here today, and what pressure should we apply in order for the government to continue this activity. As for the second question, in the getting out of the country from Schengen country, this person must have a seal of the Schengen state, and she is still be in the country, and he or she, and this person, if this stamp not exist in the passport. Thank you, Kateryna, and thank you, Iryna. We do not have time, unfortunately, and this is the end of our press conference. Thank you. Our next briefing